Felix, enjoy Ape movie, but maybe not as much as expected.
Hey there guys, I'm Felix Jones and Lego Cheetah, and welcome to my review of the movie Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Now, this is a movie about
Gorilla.
And in this movie, the
Gorilla
are living in their own habitat, away from the human beings that have mainly died out. That's all the gorilla jokes I have for the entire review. So, yeah, we're done with those. Okie dokie. So yeah, as you might have gathered from my fantastic impression, that I was not as impressed with this movie as I hoped I would be. I'm going to do a spoiler and non-spoiler section of for this review, and I'm not going to do too much for the non-spoiler people. I'm going to sum up quite a lot. So, is it an entertaining movie? Yes, obviously, of course it is. Oh, sorry about that. Traffic. Is it an entertaining movie? Yes. Does the CGI look absolutely fantastic on the apes? Yes. Does Andy Serkis hand in a fantastic performance? Obviously. But like, what did it feel like as much was achieved as was in the previous movie? No. That was where a lot of my problem. Did it feel like it lived up to some of the advertising? Depends how much of it you saw, really. Which I'll get into with the spoiler people. But I will quickly. So yeah, for the people who are gonna, I would say that the human performances were okay, not fantastic. As you've probably seen in the advertising, there's a character called Malcolm who the actor I didn't pick up the name of. He's got a beard and sort of slightly curly hair, and he's kind of taken James Franco's role as being the one guy who understands the apes, not literally understands them, but understands where they're coming from, and he's the unbiased, you know, he's the human ambassador who actually gets on with the apes, whereas the rest of the humans naturally sort of fears them, and as do the apes in the opposite direction. I personally just didn't feel like enough was achieved in this movie. There were a couple of other things, like with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like a lot happened, like a lot changed, and Caesar developed a lot as a character, and he became a totally different. He went from being like a lovable pet to his own independent human being almost, and he was capable of making his own decisions and then leading a revolution. And I guess that movie felt sort of more relatable because it took place in something very akin to the real world. So whereas this movie is sort of post-apocalyptic, so it's slightly more distanced. But one of the bigger problems I had with this movie was, and I'm still not spoilers yet, was with the original. One of the things that I really liked about Rise of the Planet of the Apes was that there was no villain for the most part. Like it seemed there wasn't a villain. There was no main villain. There were a couple of characters who were assholes, like Malfoy's character, Tom. Oh, I can never remember that guy's full name, but yeah, the guy who ran the animal sanctuary, the captivity place, he was an asshole. But then again, I suppose the actors typecast. I don't know. And also, they kind of made it out like the boss of the facility. You know, the black guy. They kind of made out when he got killed that he was supposed to be like the villain, but I still didn't feel like that was the case. And yeah, the advertising for this movie sort of promises quite a lot, and I won't say, you know, how much what I thought was going to happen and what actually happened, because I'll get into that with the spoiler people. But there was a feeling in this movie like there was an actual villain, and that immediately makes it lose a lot of depth, because with social ambiguity and moral ambiguity. It's moral ambiguity first. Moral ambiguity. But then again, also social ambiguity, because this is a movie, as the previous one was, about two separate parties combating against each other. But we were capable on both occasions to see the points of both sides. I'll get into it more with the spoiler people, but But I'd have to say that by the end of this movie, it did feel like they had assigned a character to be a villain, and that's not what the movie should be about. Um, this movie has some really stunning visuals, and it is very entertaining. And everybody else who has seen it has said that they really enjoyed it. I saw the guy who I saw it with, Sykes, who's been in a lot of my videos. Callum Sykes, he enjoyed it. He really enjoyed it, and yeah, I did enjoy it, but I just don't think that I enjoyed it anywhere near as much as I enjoyed the first one, and I didn't feel like as much was achieved, and I didn't feel like it lived up to all of its advertising, and I will get into that more with the people who. If you see the movie, you'll probably see what I'm getting at with that. Okie dokie. Let me just quickly finish off with that. So, Apes looked fantastic, really fantastic to just. So much fun to listen to them working. Oh yeah. Actually, no. I can actually get into this one other thing before we start. I was saying that I didn't really appreciate the performances from the human characters that much. I just didn't really see them as anything special. Like with the first movie, and I'm no big James Franco fan. I've never really seen a part and just gone, "Oh my god, that part was made for James Franco." I mean, he's a very good actor, and he can be funny, and he can be. And he can also be just generally a good actor. I mean, 127 Hours is a really good movie. But in the case of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I thought that he was perfect for that part. Like, I really, really felt like not only did he overcome the obstacle of acting against somebody who was, wearing a CGI suit and stuff, and imagining like he was an ape, and doing a fantastic job at that. I also felt like I knew the character, and I felt a bond between the two characters. Like him and Andy Serkis were working very well together in the performance, and not only did I feel like they were friends, but I also felt like I could believe in him being this scientist. I mean, no, there's just the way he acted and the way he spoke. He gave off that intelligence that made me feel like I could understand. Well. I think it was more in the relationship between him and Caesar that really made that just an absolutely fantastic performance. I came away thinking that was just perfect. That was how it had to be done. And I know that knowing that James Franco isn't going to be in this movie, a lot of people's immediate reaction would be to think that could ruin a movie. Like just anybody who doesn't return for a sequel and without a proper explanation in the original can often enrage an audience. But in this case, it was mainly just that the guy who took over his role, like I said, Malcolm, he just wasn't as interesting, and the performance didn't really stand out to me. Like he still overcame the same obstacle that James Franco had to overcome, except with loads of people dressed in CGI pajamas. But I just, there was nothing that I really wanted to take away. He just seemed like an average Joe. And I guess that kind of worked, but I think there was one moment that I really remember about it, and this is no spoiler. There's just this shot where he comes into the big monkey camp where all the apes live, and his eyes sort of become this really bright, vivid, cloudy blue, and that was the only thing that I really remembered. That might not even have been real. They could have. Because I can't remember his eyes being that sort of clear in any other part of the movie, but yeah, I didn't really think that any of the humans were particularly impressive. Like this guy has got a family, and obviously a family of humans, and they're all fairly okay, not exactly interesting, and like you've got Gary Oldman playing the leader of the human, I don't want to say tribe, sort of. Group, the human group that there's a local human group and a local ape group, and Gary Oldman is the leader of the humans. It's not a huge group of people, and he's fine, like a good performance, but again, just like there would never be anything that would make me go away thinking, oh yeah, that character I knew him so well because of like they imply that he lost a child. This isn't really a spoiler. You find out at one point in the movie that he lost a child, and I was sort of, okay, he lost a child. I guess that can explain some of his actions, but then again, it's sort of textbook. Oh no, he has a bias. Oh, okay. Like I would have accepted the way he was acting. See, that's the other thing I was saying about the villain. Like you could always there wasn't a villain in the first movie, and for the most part, there isn't supposed to be a villain in the second movie because you see things from everybody's perspective, and you understand that they are doing what they believe is right, and often, if not with good reason, then you can understand how fear or anger can promote them. So I guess Gary Oldman's character works in that manner. I think that's about everything I can really talk to you guys about this. I very much I would recommend seeing this movie, but I still think enough was achieved in it, and I'm holding out for the sequel, which I think is actually going to be a lot better. I felt like a lot more was going to happen, and I really don't want to say what or in what manner. But I will say that it has a lot to do with character development. I was expecting a lot more character development to take place in this movie, and I can't really give details on exactly how, but I can now. So now I'm going to go into the spoiler section. So please do see the movie. It's a really good movie, and you probably will enjoy it a little bit more than I did. I can get sort of picky about a few certain things. Like one last thing, the plot. For the most part, like I'd say for the first half of the movie, the plot did keep me guessing. I didn't know exactly where it was going to go, but then once we got into the second half of the movie, it was kind of I just sort of started going, okay, I know what's going to happen, and then and I was like thinking, okay, that's going to twist back on me again, isn't it? But it didn't. It just kind of sort of happened as it was going to happen, and there were certain parts of the, like I said, the advertising, which I won't go into, but I can't talk anymore. This is what stuff I'm going to have to talk to the spoiler people about. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Felix Jones and Lego Cheetah, and I'm going to move on to talk to the spoiler people now. So thank you very much, and enjoy the movie. Right, spoiler people. Okie dokie. Spoiler alert, right now we are going to be talking about the things that I thought weren't particularly good about this movie, because that is really where the spoilers had to come in. Okie dokie. Where to begin? Okay, let's go straight off with why this movie has a villain. It just does. Kobu becomes the villain. Is it I believe his name is pronounced Kobu. I can't quite remember. Is it Koba? Koba. Sorry, Koba is the villain of the movie, and well, no, he didn't initially, because he wasn't initially at the beginning the villain of the movie. He had his prejudices against humans, much like Gary Oldman has prejudices against apes. But then, and he takes it to an extreme level where he instigates a war by tricking the rest of his pack and trying to kill his leader, which already, you know, the audience are already thinking, oh, well, he's a dick. But then he becomes Ape Hitler, essentially. Like, he rounds up all the humans into cages, and he gets hold of a gun, and yeah, he kills other apes to make a point, just because he's so clearly desperate for power. So he's not actually being motivated by what he thinks is best for the people who he rules over. He is being motivated by the fact he wants to rule, and that makes him the villain. So that really is a level that I didn't expect this movie to go to, especially because, like I said, the first one I really didn't feel like it had a villain. So I was kind of pissed off about that. Well, not pissed off. I was more disappointed. At least initially. Nobody thought that Caesar was dead, did they? But then again, that's because the advertising showed so much. Okay, I'm going to quickly finish with Koba, and then I'm going to talk about the thing that I have with the advertising. Koba. The end of the movie, Caesar has got Koba hanging over the edge, after which was a bit of an anticlimactic punch-up, which I have to say. Like, again, I'm going to get a little bit more into that with the advertising, but it was I was expecting a lot more action, especially from Caesar's point of view, and you know, there was no reasoning with words. There was just a punch out, and yeah, that's fine. But then the final line, like, he's got him hanging over the edge, and Koba says, "Ape, ape, not kill ape," and then there's like a really long pause, and I'm just thinking, okay, the answer is you're not an ape, and then there was like at least a 10-second pause, or at least it felt like that, and then he said the obvious line, "You're not an ape," and then dropped him over the edge, and there were a few like stupid like moral problems I have with that line, mainly because I think it was dragged out when it was kind of an obvious thing to say, when what the actual fact isn't that he is not an ape. It's the fact that he has killed other apes and is actually, he's not interested in peace. He's interested in war and genocide. So there you go. That makes him the villain. Also, I mean, like, I'm not expecting Caesar to explain that to him and pull down a pie chart of statistics, the amount of apes and humans he's killed. But then again, also the other problem I have with that line is that if he, it kind of seemed like halfway through the movie, Caesar was coming to this kind of realization that he had believed. This was something else. Like, okay, it was like he had believed that apes were better than human beings, and he was suddenly coming to the realization that apes can be evil too, and maybe they're not that, and maybe they have more in common than even he was willing to accept. Which okay, but then he goes on to deny the fact that Cobra is an ape. If he denies that Cobra is an ape, then he's just going back to this stupid belief in his head that apes are good and anything that isn't an ape isn't. It's like people who call anybody in history, people who would call Hitler or any murderer, they would call them a monster. They're not human, they're monsters, but they are human. They may have no humanity, or seem like they don't, but they are still human beings, and to deny that fact is to deny the fact that there are bad people out there, and you can't just pretend that the whole world is full of normal people and evil people. I don't know, I'm getting into a whole philosophical thing that I don't really want to get that really is inappropriate for me to get into. I don't know, I guess sometimes you bring emotional baggage and opinions with you when you come into a movie like, especially a movie that deals with moral and social ambiguities. Okay, I think I've gotten my thing off my chest about the villains there. Now, the thing about the advertising, how to put it? Anybody who saw the advertising for these movies saw the lines like Caesar said the line that stuck in my memory and that I was waiting for throughout the movie was Caesar saying the lines, "I'm sorry, my friend, war has already begun." Or "war has already begun, I'm sorry, my friend," the way that it came in the movie. And I was waiting for that line. I was expecting it to be about halfway through. Like, I'd seen footage of apes riding horses and firing guns, and I'd seen footage of what's the word? Bargain. What's the thing that they always say on cinema sins? The cheap equivalent of Samuel L. Jackson sort of sat around the fire going, you know, the scary thing is they don't need light or energy, and the reason that made me think was that I was like, oh wow, so like that sort of thing is as a threat, so like there is real war going on, and about when we got to halfway through the movie, I was aware of the fact that clip hadn't been shown yet, and I did sort of think, if these guys save that to the end, I'm going to be pretty pissed off about this, because what I was waiting for, what I was expecting with this movie, especially in like the posters where you saw an ape, which I think everyone assumed was Caesar, or it actually is Caesar for all I know. It probably is. It might be Cobra. I didn't have a chance to have a proper decent look at that poster again since I saw the movie, but then I was expecting that would mean if there was going to be a kind of war between the apes and the humans that Caesar was able to consent upon, that would require him to go through some massive character development since the previous movie. Since at the end of the previous movie, for the most part, he disapproved of murder and he just wanted peace. So I was wondering what could possibly happen that would bring that out in him. I was expecting something really raw and powerful, but then it turned out that never happened. In fact, you never see Caesar pick up a gun. He makes a point out. Well, he picks up a sawn-off. I think it's a sawn-off shotgun. But then he throws it into the lake to show that he would never use a gun. He's better than that. Good. But then I would like him to develop from that. But instead, he's more like Ape Jesus, because he gets shot and he falls and he comes back and then he kicks Cobra's ass, just like it was obviously going to happen. And nothing is really achieved through that. All that has happened is that, yes, war has begun, but it's not begun in this movie. Like, the trailer showed everything. It didn't show all the visuals, and it didn't. I didn't think that the storyline seemed worth that movie. Like, we could have developed so much more. I guess I don't know. I wanted something a little less predictable with the second half. I wanted to see Caesar change, but all that we saw from Caesar, I think that like the thing that they tried to make the emotional crux for his storyline in this movie was coming to the realization that he was able to make a mistake and that humans were different from a way that is beyond his willing. But like I said just then, that didn't happen really, and and you know, from the very beginning of the movie, where I see that he's got a family and and he's got I guess a mate would be the best term for it, and he's got 2 kids. It suddenly, all the 8 characters suddenly become so human, which was fantastic. I really should have said that in the earlier part of the review, but just. So as soon as I knew that as soon as I felt like he was human, I felt like he could make a mistake and he was mortal, and so it didn't really come as much of a shock to me, the idea that he could have made a mistake about Pacoba. What I wanted to come as a shock was what could possibly turn such a, you know, elite, for the most part morally good character into a morally dark one who would accept war and embrace it. But in the end, it's not like that happened. In the end, he was still the same morally good character who would never swat a fly. He managed to kill another ape, but then he denied that he was ever an ape in the first place. And yeah, he's still just the leader. And yes, war is going to happen, like I said, but not in this movie. We saw a little bit of like a minor battle. I don't know. I know I'm looking forward to the sequel, knowing that the sequel is going to be better, but I really felt like there was so much more that could have been done with this movie, and so little was achieved. And I do have a really big thing against movies that show advertising, in particular dialogue from the end of the movie, because dialogue in advertising, especially if you're somebody who likes to watch a trailer, sometimes more than once, I might watch a trailer 2 or 3 times before I see a movie, just because I enjoy, you know, like the ramping up the tension, or maybe, and some people study the trailers, you know, and I don't usually do that, but my point being that you tend to remember the dialogue, and you will wait till you hear that dialogue, and if that dialogue isn't uttered until after the big conflict in the movie, then at the very least you know which characters are going to survive the big conflict, and on top of that, you never expect that to happen because of the obvious issue I just mentioned and various other issues that you're technically spoiling the end of the movie. So when they do that sort of thing in a movie, I often get very, well, not very, very annoyed. I get annoyed and disappointed because you find yourself waiting for that moment, and that leaves you waiting throughout the entire movie. I think most advertising, you should the only dialogue you should hear in advertising is from maybe. Especially if it's a movie where the plot is everything. In a comedy, you can scatter dialogue from any part of the movie because they just pick out the best jokes. But with a drama or something where the plot is really crucial, like in this, something that's very plot heavy, you should definitely not use dialogue from the end of the movie, because that is a spoiler that I will keep waiting for. You should use dialogue from the first hour, maybe only the first half an hour. So yeah, you can see why I would have a problem with that, and how that could be something that I think any filmmaker should take on board when it comes to advertising anything they want to do. In a trailer, you should never use dialogue especially in a plot-heavy trailer, never use dialogue for more than an hour into the movie. And definitely don't use any dialogue that takes place after the main conflict. You can probably use a little bit of dialogue that took place during the main climactic conflict. It really does depend on context and subjectivity, but I'd say that a definite never do is never use dialogue from after the big climactic, big climactic conflict, because otherwise you are giving away how that conflict ends. So I knew that piece of dialogue was coming, so I knew Caesar wasn't going to die when he got shot, and then I knew Caesar wasn't going to die in the main conflict, and I knew he wasn't going to die of his bullet wound. I knew that he was going to survive all of it, because then he could have that line. And also, it raised my expectations for something that didn't happen. So yeah, so that is how I was disappointed with this movie. I felt like the build-up that I was feeling personally wasn't as good as what was given to me. And I really am looking forward to the next movie. I would say, actually, I'd say fiver. I bet a fiver to anybody who watches this movie that Caesar dies in the next movie. I I reckon he was going to die at the end of this one a little bit, but you know, because he's never going to live to see whatever. I think that if the third movie will probably take place a few more years in the future, maybe, or it might take place like only a few months in the future after this one ended, and it will probably see the extinction of, or the extinction or total encapturement of the human race, and the monkeys will go into something. You know, the human race will be put in some kind of peril that would mean that they will then degenerate in intelligence to become the creatures that we know and the humans that we know in Planet of the Apes. And also Caesar is going to get killed and taken over by somebody else. I thought Koba was going to take him over. I thought Koba would be like the initiator, but nope, he died. So the plot reset itself to pretty much the beginning of the movie. Except now, not only do the humans hate the apes, but they now have intent to fight them, which doesn't seem like that much of an achievement for such a long and built up movie. Alright, I think that's everything I have to say. Well, like I said, I did enjoy the movie really, and I enjoyed watching it, but I still came out of the cinema feeling a bit sort of, there's so much more. It's like a waste of potential as far as I was concerned. I mean, I know they need to say something for the next movie, but there's still so much more. I mean, like, I don't know. I think just if we'd had Caesar go through some kind of moral change, like maybe if he actually did come to dislike humans by the end of this movie, then I could get on with it. But he doesn't. Nothing in that regard changes. Sorry, parched. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the sequel to this movie. I enjoyed this movie, but yeah, it's definitely think that much more could be achieved. And yeah, thank you very, very much for watching, especially if you watched all the way through this one. I kind of prattled on a bit there, but I don't think a single word was wasted. This has, yeah, thank you. I think this has been a good review. I think so. Yes. I felt like I had a lot to say about this one. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'm Felix Jones and Lego Cheetah, and have a great evening.